The tariffs in the United States are just a facade. Behind them lies a deeper historical transformation. On April 8, 2025, Dalio pointed out in a social media article that we are experiencing a major shift that occurs roughly every century. This shift has happened many times in history. Dalio believes the current world is shaped by 5 fundamental forces. First is the collapse of the monetary and economic order. Global debt is excessively high, and its continuous growth creates an unsustainable state. Debtor nations, like the United States, have overborrowed, while creditor nations, such as China, hold too much debt. In the past globalized world, this imbalance of trade and capital had to be corrected in some way. The level of debt in creditor nations and its growth rate are clearly unsustainable, necessitating significant adjustments in the monetary order. Second is the disintegration of the American order, marked by educational opportunities. The vast gaps in productivity, income, wealth, and values, combined with the inability of the current U.S. system to effectively address issues, have led to a deadly struggle between right-wing and left-wing populists in America. This situation is weakening democratic institutions, because democracy requires compromise and the rule of law. History shows that both often collapse during this period. Third is the restructuring of the international geopolitical order. The era dominated by one major power, led by the United States, is over. The multilateral cooperative world order led by the U.S. is being replaced by a power-based, unilateral approach. The United States is still the world's strongest nation, but is shifting towards a unilateralism focused on America first, manifesting as trade wars, geopolitical conflicts, and sometimes even military confrontations. Fourth is the increase in natural disasters. Droughts, floods, and pandemics are becoming increasingly destructive. Finally, there is a restructuring of technological change. Technologies like artificial intelligence will profoundly impact all aspects of life, including the monetary, economic, and political orders as well as international order. Dalio urges not to be distracted by dramatic changes like tariffs. One should focus on these 5 forces and their interrelations. He suggests considering how tariffs will affect the monetary and market economy order, as well as how the domestic order in the U.S. might weaken, affecting related knowledge and international geopolitical order. In finance, economics, politics, and geopolitics, significant damage is caused. Climate change effectively weakens the global capacity to respond to climate change and technological development. In some respects, it may benefit the U.S., such as increasing domestic technology production. However, it will also damage the capital markets needed to support political development. What is currently occurring is just a contemporary version of countless situations in history. He suggests studying the actions taken by decision-makers in similar past situations. For instance, suspending debt payments to hostile nations, and establishing capital controls to prevent free capital outflow. Imposing special taxes is another option. These measures, previously unimaginable, now require serious consideration in the context of monetary politics and the collapse of geopolitical order. The ensuing depressions, civil wars, and world wars ultimately lead to the establishment of new orders. These cycles have repeated throughout history, responding to changes in the world. This describes several distinct phases of this grand cycle, helping to identify the current phase and predict what might happen in the future. Dalio's newly published article is not just an analysis of the current situation, but also a reminder to maintain independent thinking in the market. It encourages reflection on the underlying major conflicts. One must not be confused by the myriad of appearances that mislead the American people. Yesterday, the White House in the U.S. released a speech indicating its stance and urging the world to bear the cost. The economic advisor of the president, the committee chairman, in a speech at the Institute, proposed a shocking viewpoint. America can no longer be the sucker, the chairman pointed out. that for a long time, the US has provided two major global public goods. One is a security umbrella. The second is the dollar and US Treasury bonds as global reserve assets. These have allowed the world to enjoy unprecedented peace and prosperity. But the cost has been borne by the American people. The chairman emphasized that the president has made it clear he will no longer allow other countries to take advantage of America. He proposed several plans for other countries to share the costs. The first is to accept tariffs on their exports to the US without retaliatory measures. The second is to stop unfair trade and buy more American goods. The third is to increase defense spending to promote American arms purchases. The fourth is to build factories directly in the US so they can avoid tariffs. The fifth is to directly subsidize the US Treasury to help America provide global public goods. Upon seeing this fifth point, one might truly be astonished. The chairman also particularly noted the changes in tariff policies and the misconceptions economists have about tariffs. The current state of America's long-term trade position proves that traditional economic models have failed. On the contrary, tariffs can make other countries bear the costs, providing funding for tax cuts in America. In summary, the core viewpoint is that America can no longer be the one at a disadvantage. It's time for the whole world to pay for global public goods provided by the US. In his view, this marks the beginning of a shift towards an America-first unilateral approach. Finally, let's look at a recent report released by Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs has just revised down its GDP growth forecast for the US in 2025. They raised the probability of the US entering a recession within 12 months from 35% to 45%. They pointed out that the economic forecast was lowered primarily due to three factors: a sharp tightening of financial conditions, foreign consumer boycotts of US products, and the persistent rise in policy uncertainty. These factors will have a more severe impact on capital expenditure than previously anticipated. The reciprocal tariff policy announced on April 2nd is much more aggressive than the market expected. The 10% minimum tariff has already been implemented, and the remaining plans, if fully enacted, will raise the effective tariff rate in the US by about 20 percentage points. Even later agreements with certain countries may not change this. Goldman Sachs warns that if the White House actually implements most or all of the tariffs, they will have to revise their baseline forecast to account for a surge in the US economy. In the current non-recession baseline scenario, Goldman Sachs expects the Federal Reserve to cut rates 3 times starting in June, reducing the federal benchmark rate to between 3.5% and 3.75%. In the event of a recession, the Fed may cut rates by about 200 basis points over the next year. The report also noted that the sensitivity of financial conditions to tariffs is rebounding from moderate levels in 2025 to much greater fluctuations seen during the trade war period of 2018 to 2019. The policy uncertainty index has soared to levels far above those seen during the last trade war. The impact this time may be much greater than the first trade war. As last time, more US companies were affected by broader uncertainties regarding tariffs from both the US and foreign nations. History tells us that every crisis is an opportunity, and every challenge contains new possibilities. Let us remain vigilant and respond to the potential economic storm ahead with resilience. Finally, please like and follow the market insights from the tavern, as they help illuminate the path forward.